bodies objectified, their voices denied, steadily trafficked through city roads, intersections, and freeways of the labor expert policy, the live-in caregiver program, and mail-order bride destinations licensed to agencies, pimps, husbands, and middle-class families, who violently impose their supreme malicious liberties on third world women who bear no importance. Third world women who bear no importance. Third world women like Veronica Vasquez, whose virginal 19 years was violated and stolen by her blue-eyed serial rapist husband to secure the security of her perishing family in the barren province of Valenzuela. Veronica Vasquez can fathom where she has gone or grapple with the promised splendor that never arrived. As her wavy husband pleasures himself in the remains of Veronica's once steering body, climaxing on a breathing, cadaver who begs to be wakened from the pillaging nightmare that does not cease. The pillaging nightmare that does not cease. And still you asked, where have all the women gone? Failed by their homestead, who refuses to set them free, packaged, priced, and exported deliberately, struggling in alien countries that offer no opportunities, burdened by the debts that chain their histories, living through their ancestors' colonized miseries. Sara Balabagan, Silvia Banaang, Gloria Barlaan, Milagros Bordador, Flor Contemplacion, Maritas Decardo, Evelyn Flores, Edna Fojas, Anita Fugan, Eleanor Hasereno, Heidi Puperatum, Maria Fe Ocampo, Susan Remerata, Maricris Sioson, Sara Tabar, Emilita Villa, commodified, objectified, vilified, denied, mysteriously died, and still you asked, where have all the women gone?
It's been happening for a long time. For example, in the past, indentured workers were brought in to do domestic work from the lower classes of Britain, Scotland, and Ireland, then shifted to women from the Caribbean and the Philippines. And while childcare always becomes a hot issue in the media during elections, for example, there has never been a national childcare system put in place in Canada, ever. It was the Caribbean women that first came to Canada to do this work under the West Indian Domestic Scheme, and it was this program didn't allow for the genuine integration into Canadian society as they did with previous women from Ireland, Scotland, Britain. So there's a big difference between how you can see the racialized experience of women throughout the history of domestic work in Canada. As Filipinos, we are familiar with many questions and comments as to how or why Filipinos are so associated with care. With this country's growing healthcare crisis, rather than looking at alternatives or solutions that will genuinely address the needs of all Canadians, the state and the private sector choose to push these neoliberal fixes that further deepen and widen the social reproduction gap and undermine the principles of universal health care. Instead of sharing the responsibilities of social reproduction and increasing access to public health care, a chunk of the burden is being shifted onto the backs of transnational women as the country's economic progress expands through our oppression and exploitation. This is not a future we accept for our community or for any community. So now we have to ask ourselves, where do we go?
That's it. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone here today for your participation, for joining us in celebrating International Women's Day. Today is also a celebration of the history of our organizing in our community. Most importantly, the history and the ongoing strength of Filipino-Canadian women's resistance, our own resistance. As such, I would like to acknowledge the presence of all women, particularly the young women who have joined us in our struggle for genuine women's empowerment and liberation. I also would like to invite other women, particularly again the young women, to join us and be part of the struggle that will free us from all forms of exploitation and oppression as women, as workers, and as people of color. But I know that in order for us to take the challenge of organizing our community, we need to really have a deep understanding of our current situation as a community in Canada, our history, including the forces that shape our reality, and also our future as a people and as a community. Indeed, for every neoliberal agenda that's put in place, thousands of Filipinos are forced to leave the country to work as healthcare workers, caregivers, entertainers, factory workers, construction workers, and also mail-order brides. Migration has been promoted, normalized, and even advertised as the in thing. As a result, thousands of Filipino women are driven out of the Philippines, traded as commodities to be bought and sold in the international market. Over the years, we have not only seen the rapid increase in women's forced migration, but we also bear witness to the intensification of our exploitation and oppression. We have seen and experienced the most vicious attacks and blows perpetrated by imperialist globalization against women, particularly against our women. So Canada, amongst many other countries, has been the top destination for Filipinos. So by the mid-1970s, we started to see more Filipinos migrating to Canada, some through family sponsorship and some as skilled workers. Garment workers, for instance, were actively recruited from the Philippines to work in garment factories in Winnipeg. During this period, or wave, as we refer to it, the non-accreditation of our education and previous profession was already being in place, as some members of our community started experiencing difficulty in getting a job related to their field of profession. So while few were able to, many Filipinos at that time had to either get some retraining or train for a completely different profession. When the 1980s came, this was the time when we saw the rapid increase in Filipino migration to Canada through the federal government's Foreign Domestic Movement, or FDM. The FDM was implemented as a response to the growing need for childcare. Highly skilled and highly educated Filipino women are subjected to the most exploitative and oppressive conditions under the LCP that strip them of their humanity and dignity as a woman and as a human being. Using the promise of a permanent residency and family reunification, Canada continues to use the LCP to smoothly implement its neoliberal agenda of privatization and liberalization. It also uses the LCP as a measure to mask the Canadian government's inability and lack of political will in providing a universal childcare program that will benefit all women in Canada, particularly the working class women in Canada. It is also being used to divert the issue that the LCP and the absence of national childcare program, the privatization of elderly care, and the care of people with disability is a woman's issue, an issue that must be taken up by each and every woman in Canada. However, we all know that it is not the case, particularly in the absence of a genuine and progressive Canadian women's movement. As such, the LCP continues to be used to divide the working class and marginalized peoples in Canada. With more and more Filipino women coming to Canada through the FDM and the LCP, the concrete conditions of our community rapidly changed. As our women started sharing their experiences under the LCP, the long hours of work, low pay and unpaid overtime, the verbal, physical, emotional abuse, rape, and deportation, Filipino-Canadian women saw the urgent need to organize themselves in order to collectively address this issue. True and genuine progressive movement must only have one response to those sentiments, and that is women's liberation is not negotiable.
I think these issues and stories you brought up are really just like the stories, our own stories as Filipino Canadians. These are the stories of our mothers, our sisters, our grandmas. It's weird, but I think the live-in caregiver program, we can see it as kind of like this family legacy or family business that keeps being passed down from generation to generation. Our family, at least for my family, it's like that. And I know many of us here, women here, we're privileged enough to be in university and not having to take hold of this family business. And while we aren't the ones that are going to become like live-in caregivers, it's important that we fight for our women regardless, because if it's not us, then who will take on the struggle? So I guess just to end this portion of this panel, I just want to urge you all to join us in our struggle for genuine empowerment and liberation of our women. And thank you.
Is this for the camera? Can you repeat that? Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day!